Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Good Grief, Life After Loss. Happy Thursday. It might as well be Friday. It's the weekend. We've made it. Of course, I am recording this on a Monday, but I'm already manifesting for the weekend. I hope you all have something fun to look forward to this weekend. I don't really know. Oh, I have something fun. I am forcing poor Harrison to do a couples photo shoot this weekend, which I'm sure he is absolutely dreading. But I found this photographer on TikTok who's doing, he's building his portfolio and wants to do a bunch of couples shoots around the New England area all summer. And free is a good price. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Hopefully the images do not reflect the free price though. But those are my weekend plans and hoping it does not rain for the 12th weekend in a row. But I hope you all have something fun planned. Anyways, today's episode is focused on mental health because while we are now in June, I just spent the last month, which was May Mental Health Month, thinking about mental health, seeing all of the social media posts, all of the conversations happening around the topic, which first off, might I just say is amazing. I think it's really cool how open as a society everyone is to talking about mental health now. And obviously there's still a ton of work to go. But I think if you look back 10, 20 years ago, the conversations that are happening now were definitely not happening then. So I don't know, it's just really cool to see the progress that's being made, and I'm curious to see, in 10 years from now, what those conversations will look like. Anyways, what I wanted to talk about is something that I don't think gets nearly enough attention, which is the mental health of grievers. Because when someone dies, everyone understandably is focusing on the person who died, the person we lost. We talk about who they were, what happened, how much we miss them, how unfair it is, how much they mattered. But we don't spend nearly as much time talking about what happens to those of us who are left behind. The people who now have to wake up every day and somehow continue living without them. And whether you lost someone to suicide, cancer, addiction, an accident, old age, or something completely unexpected, grief can absolutely wreck your mental health. And I feel like there is no escaping it, honestly. And it's not because you're doing this grief thing wrong. It's not because you're weak. It's because grief changes you at your core. And I think one of the hardest parts is that nobody really warns you what grief does to your brain. People will tell you that you're going to be sad, you're going to cry, you're going to miss them. But no one honestly talks about the fact that you might suddenly feel like you cannot function, and that you will forget how to do even the most basic things. And I did learn there's actually a term for it, and it is called grief brain. And I like that term. It feels very accurate. And if you've experienced it, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You walk into a room and completely forget why you were there. You reread the same email 6 times and don't retain any of the information. You lose your train of thought in the middle of a sentence. You can't focus. You can't remember things. You feel exhausted all the time. You forget to eat. You forget to sleep. You feel like a less capable version of yourself. And no, you're not going crazy. It's not all in your head. Well, technically it is in your head, but not in the way that people mean, I guess. Because grief literally affects your brain. And when you are grieving, our brains are flooded with stress hormones and neurochemicals, and the part of our brain that's responsible for memory, concentration, emotional regulation, learning, organization, all of that is under immense pressure and also irregular pressure. And if you add in disrupted sleep, anxiety, exhaustion, and emotional overwhelm, suddenly normal tasks do not feel normal or possible anymore. And I think a lot of grievers quietly wonder if they are losing it and if they will ever snap out of this brain fog. And I definitely know I felt that. And I feel like I've talked to a lot of people who felt that way too. Why can't I focus? Why can't I remember anything? Why can't I just pull it together? But the truth is, your brain is trying to process one of the biggest changes a human being can experience in their life. So of course you're struggling and distracted and exhausted because you are carrying something incredibly heavy and complex. And I think that's why grief can honestly be so dangerous when it comes to our own mental health, because grief doesn't just make you sad. It can make you stop taking care of yourself altogether. And that really is the scary part. Like, I remember after Sam died, my family and I had just flown home from Australia. It was probably a 25-hour travel day. Everything had happened so fast. And suddenly, we were planning Sam's celebration of life at Utah Olympic Park, which would later be attended by over 1,000 people, which is kind of insane. But family was flying into town. Friends were arriving and asking how they could help. There were logistics, phone calls, decisions, details, so much planning to be done. And I was weirdly excited. I wanted this distraction, something to do. I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to make sure it was perfect, which is why I felt like I couldn't leave the planning in the hands of adults when Sam was a child, and I felt like it should feel like it was for a child. I don't know. Anyways, somewhere in the middle of all that chaos and all that planning, I completely stopped paying attention to myself. I wasn't eating. I wasn't drinking enough water. I definitely wasn't sleeping, and none of it was intentional. It's not like I was trying to punish myself or be dramatic. I just genuinely didn't notice. And my brain was so focused on the fact that I had just lost my big brother, and it was so focused on everything that had to happen next that I completely forgot that I was a human being who still needed the basics of food, water, and sleep. And then one day I was standing on a balcony at Utah Olympic Park, looking onto the pool deck, trying to plan this celebration of life, and suddenly I fainted, completely passed out. Thankfully, did not go over the railing and passed out backwards. And by the way, as a 14-year-old girl, that is completely mortifying that the EMTs have to be called to check on me, and that the people around me have to ask if I've been eating and if I'm healthy, because they think I'm intentionally starving myself and not just grieving. And by the way, trust me, I am not someone who usually forgets to eat, but that's the thing about grief. Like, it takes you out of your normal, disconnects you from your routines, it disconnects you from yourself and the basic instinct and intuition to keep you alive, because you become so focused on the person who died that you stop noticing the person who is still here, which is you. And I think a lot of us do this, and not just with food, but with everything. We stop exercising, we stop sleeping, we stop seeing our friends, we stop going outside and leaving our bed, we stop making doctor's appointments, we stop doing things that make us feel like ourselves. And the tricky thing about that is it honestly does not happen all at once. It really sneaks up on you. It's slow, it's subtle, it's first a missed meal, then you cancel a plan, ignoring the text from a friend checking up on you, one sleepless night, and then suddenly you realize that you have just been surviving, running on fumes, instead of living and taking care of yourself. And it's kind of a terrifying realization, honestly. And while we are on the topic of mental health, I think we also need to address something else, which is the thoughts, the really uncomfortable, unsafe thoughts. Because when you lose the person you love most, some dark things can creep into your head. Like, if they're not here, I don't want to be here. What is the point anymore? It should have been me. I don't know how I'm supposed to keep doing this. I don't want to keep doing this. And those thoughts can be absolutely terrifying, and they are far more common than I think people realize. I have heard them from grieving parents, from grieving siblings and spouses, and grieving friends, people who desperately want to live but simply cannot imagine how they're supposed to live without their person. And I want to pause and say, like, if those thoughts are persistent, worsening, or making you feel unsafe, please, please, please reach out for help. And I will link resources in the episode description. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that many grievers experience these thoughts at some point. And it's not because they actually want to die. It's not because they don't want to be alive anymore. But it's because the pain of losing someone can be so overwhelming that your brain starts searching for an escape hatch, the easy way out of the pain and the inevitable healing process that is going to take place. But the problem is that grief can sometimes evolve into something so much bigger, like depression, anxiety, this complicated grief storm, which is a place where life stops moving forward, a place where you are no longer just mourning someone, but suddenly you become trapped by the loss. And that is why taking care of your mental health matters so much. And it's not because you're trying to move on, because I honestly hate that phrase. I am not interested in moving on from the fact that I lost my brother. But I am interested in figuring out how to carry Sam with me while still taking care of myself. And I think as hard as it is to remember this, the reality is, yes, your loved one did die. And that freaking sucks and is horrible. But you know who didn't die? You. Your story did not end. Your needs did not disappear. Your body still needs care. Your brain still needs support. Your life still matters. And I honestly, that might be one of the hardest parts of grief. Because at some point, whether we like it or not, we are asked to continue living. And it's not because we're ready. It's not because it's fair. It's not because we're over it. It's not even because we want to sometimes. But it's because we are here and we are still living. And I need you to remember that. So if you're listening today, I don't want to challenge you to transform your life. I don't want to tell you to start a gratitude journal and become the best version of yourself. I think that is a tall order and not what we all need right now. But I do just want to check in. Like, stop and ask yourself, have you eaten today? Have you had enough water? Have you slept? Have you talked to someone? Have you stepped outside and seen the sunlight recently? Are you carrying something that might be easier if someone helped carry it? Because grief is hard enough and you don't have to make it harder by trying to carry it all alone. And if nobody has told you this lately, taking care of yourself is not abandoning the person you lost. It is not forgetting them. It's not loving them less, but it is simply recognizing that while their life ended, yours did not. And both realities deserve your attention. And I know that the person you lost would want you to take care of yourself, to heal, and to live. And I know it's going to take a while to get to that living life to the fullest point, but I really do believe that we will all get there eventually. As always, my DMs are always open. I am always available to talk. And if this episode made you think of someone in your life, please send it to them and let them know you're thinking of them. And if this episode resonated with you, then I would absolutely love for you to leave me a 5-star review. Thank you again, as always, for being here. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you next week.